Muy buenas tardes. Continuamos con la noticia en el búnker digital, tu lugar seguro de información. El día de hoy tenemos una entrevista internacional de María Corina Machado, así es que vamos a escuchar de qué se trata. Muy bien, vámonos al video.
María Corina Machado, she will provide insights on the challenges and opportunities that we are facing after July 28th. Maria Corina will deliver a 50-minute briefing followed by a Q&A session. The entire event is scheduled to last 1 hour. And for the Q&A, we kindly ask that you submit your question via the Zoom chat.
We are living decisive times for Venezuela and the region. These are dangerous times, certainly. And the things are, and the situation is moving, even though from abroad, perhaps not everything is being seen in its actual dimension. So I have to say that on behalf of all Venezuelans that have been silenced during these years, and especially these last days, many of your colleagues that have been persecuted and some in prison, and on behalf of all the Venezuelan society, I have to thank you because through you, the world has learned what's happening in Venezuela and the magnitude of what took place on July 28th. Even though we've talked before, I have to insist on what that day represents because I am absolutely convinced that it represents the closing of a cycle, political cycle, and the start of a new era. It has profound implications for Venezuelan society beyond the electoral result. And that's something that you've heard me say, and I insist on that. If you have an approach to the events in Venezuela exclusively from the electoral perspective, you will stay in the surface and not understand the magnitude of the forces that have been evolving in the last months. A year and a half ago, Venezuela was seen from abroad and also perhaps from within as a country without much hope, in which most of society felt frustrated and some even betrayed by the political parties and leaders. And it seemed almost impossible to bring back hope, to unite the country, and to mobilize in the social movement for freedom. Many people said that explicitly. It is impossible to have any political change in Venezuela, and you better resign to start preparing for perhaps a political change in 2030. 6 years more of this Maduro presidency, and we started mobilizing the country, town after town, city after city. It was an enormous effort of awakening and getting people together and trusting each other. We started from abroad, I would say from the periferia to the center, from rural Venezuela to the cities, and from the poorest sector, increasingly involving and getting enthusiasm from the middle class, which was the hardest to get committed, middle classes. And we were able to do that, and we finally managed to carry out an incredible citizen process with the primaries on October 22nd. Many times we heard in the days before the primaries that it was impossible to carry out a process of such complexity without the participation of the regime through the Electoral Council or the armed forces, and that it was going to be a very low turnout, at most 300,000 people. It ended up being an impeccable process done by the citizens. The citizens appropriated the primaries, and we had a turnout of almost 3 million people. The regime underestimated the Venezuelan society and also the capacity to organize such an incredible and challenging process. Then we had the huge challenge to be able to carry out an election with a unitary candidate. They thought that by banning me from participating as a candidate, we would, simply get out of the electoral route and give up. And we did exactly the contrary. And we were able to find a very brave and honest person, Edmundo González Urrutia, to assume that responsibility. And they told us it was impossible, that Edmundo was not going to reach the final day, that they were not going to let him run, and that people will not be committed to vote for someone that 2 months before no one knew. And we found a way. We were persecuted. We had not even one interview on national TV, not even one interview on national radio. We managed to deliver an epic campaign without media, without money, and being absolutely persecuted. Our team, especially our campaign managers, were all either in prison or have taken asylum in the Argentina embassy. And we managed to do it. And then they told us it was absolutely impossible to prove the degree of fraud the regime has been able to do in the past. Yes, we've had over 30 elections in these 25 years. They all had some degree of manipulation and fraud. Some of them are simply sham elections in the past, and that was exactly what the regime was planning to do. And once again, they didn't expect this level of turnout. It was massive. They never expected people would overcome fear and vote, even in places where the Chavismo has won always by landslide in the last 25 years. Vote for El Mundo, and we won. But most of all, they never expected that we were going to be able to prove our victory. And what took place on July 28th and 29th is one of the events that I think Venezuela will most be proudest of in our history. And I'm very proud to be part of it. Over 1 million volunteers that had some specific task, worked all throughout our country, and were managed to get the tally sheets, to collect them, to take them to places, all hidden places all around Venezuela, where we had the security of electricity and internet, so that they could be digitalized, scanned, digitalized, and we put them in a web page that in 24 hours it was open to the whole world, analyzed, to scrutinize. Since then, those tally sheets today represent over 84% of the tally sheets and over 85% of the total votes. And we proved that Edmundo González Urrutia won by a landslide of 67% versus Maduro, who got 30%. But don't get mistaken. Over 4.5 million Venezuelans that live abroad were not allowed to vote, that are actually registered. Were not allowed to vote. Neither around 3 to 4 million young Venezuelans that have turned 18 in the last years, and which the regime knows is the toughest, strongest support we have. So if those Venezuelans have had the chance, these had been open elections, you can be sure that the results would have been over 90% support for the democratic forces. So this is not a polarized society. This is not a divided country. This is a country united more than ever, not only rejecting the regime and its corrupt and criminal nature, but around values. We want a country in which we can live united, in which we can work with dignity, in which we can have open markets and private property can be respected, but most of all, a country, a nation that where we can bring our kids back home. Since that day, the regime started a brutal campaign of repression that has been denounced by every single. Oh, let me go just back to one thing regarding our electoral process and material. Over 20 organizations and scholars have analyzed, studied, because we did it as an open source, and all the information is on the web. Professors in universities such as Michigan and Berkeley have done independent studies. The Carter Center, which was an observer, did as well, and the independent panel of the United Nations that were also observers in the election analyzed our tally sheets and our results. Every single one has concluded that our material and our results are authentic, and the results the Electoral Council announced without producing one single number are not real. So today, everyone knows that Edmundo Gonzalez is the president-elect in Venezuela. Everybody, even the Chavista base, even the armed forces, because we wouldn't have been able to collect all our tally if we hadn't had the cooperation of members of the armed forces that were deployed as in the Plan República, and members and employees from the International Council, the Electoral Council, which disobeyed orders and not to give us our official tally sheets. Having said that, we've seen in this last month the most brutal campaign of repression. Anyone publicly or directly associated with the 28th of July today are either in hiding, have left the country, are under asylum, or are in jail. That's the situation right now in Venezuela. Maduro ordered the strongest, most brutal repression in the hours after the election, and over 2,500 Venezuelans were detained, mostly young and poor people. Many were hurt, tortured, and over 150 children under 18, Venezuelans under 18, were put in prison. They were accused of terrorism, and many of them were forced to record videos supporting Maduro. So far, most of them, of the children, have been released because of the huge campaign that was deployed, and many of you abroad helped a lot denouncing individual cases. But today there are over 200 women still in prison. Some of them have been subject of sexual assault and torture. It has been so traumatic that la CIDH, the Inter-American Commission, stated at the OAS Permanent Council that what's happening in Venezuela can be qualified as practice of state terrorism. They haven't said that since the military dictatorships of last century in Latin America. So right now, Maduro has decided to remain atrincherado, surrounded by the military high command. And I have to say that over 300 military have been detained as well in the last weeks. That's information we had. Probably it's much more than that. And they're trying to produce, terror in every single institution, and many public employees have been forced out of their jobs and fired just because they find they have information regarding the electoral process in their WhatsApps or in their emails. So this is a tough moment regarding what the country can express publicly. Nonetheless, we've seen a huge mobilization around the world, and we believe Venezuela has turned into a global cause, and we need to maintain that in order for Maduro to understand that every day that goes by, the cost of staying in power through violence and repression will increase, and understand that his best option is to accept a negotiated transition. We are not there yet. There are several efforts taking place, such as Colombia, Mexico, and Brazil's. But there's something that we need to say. There's not one single democracy in the world that has recognized the result Maduro announced. So we believe that we've never been in a stronger position in terms of our legitimacy, in terms of cohesion of Venezuelan society, and in terms of the understanding of the international community, what the regime represents, not only for Venezuela, but the threats in the region. I would end just this introduction by making an alarm in terms of the forces that are growing in Venezuela. On one hand, we have a huge indignation because of Maduro pretending to rob popular sovereignty. Second, the rage and fear that they have produced through repression. And the third force I see growing and worries me a lot is how the economy is being shrinking in the last weeks, and especially how this is hurting the poor sectors of Venezuela. We fear that the fourth quarter of this year could come with a significant decrease in consumption of food and basic needs in this sector. The mixture of all these feelings certainly can produce strong social unrest, but at the same time, an important increase in migration, which we are already seeing happening in Brazil and Colombia. We haven't had the official data from Migración Colombia yet. We've had some from Brazil that it's not official yet, but it's very significant. So I think the international community should understand that we've never been in a better position in terms of forcing the regime to understand that they better get involved in a serious negotiation in which we're willing to give conditions and guarantees, but understand the risk, the growing risk for the whole region if Maduro decides to prolong this agony. So we're here, we are never going to give up, and when we say hasta el final, it is hasta el final. So thank you very much to all of you for this opportunity to exchange views.
Thank you, Maria Corina. We have plenty of questions, so we will start with them. The first one from Julia Science-Scott from Reuters. What options does the opposition have in practical terms? International pressure has been pretty limited. The government doesn't seem to be bothered by the possibility of new sanctions, and people in Venezuela reasonably fear arrest if they attend protest. Is there really a path forward? What will happen if yourself and Mundo Gonzalez are arrested? And is there a real possibility of the military rejecting Maduro?
Well, that's like 10 questions. So let me try to answer as fast as I can. Of course, there's a path forward. As I said before, and that's why I went all the way through the last 2 years, we've always heard it's impossible to move ahead. And look where we are right now. I mean, it was impossible to think a couple of months ago that no one in the West or democratic countries would not recognize a result of Maduro. And I think there are many actions and there are many initiatives that can be taken. Some are being considered, so others not yet. And I do think that the decision of Maduro to increase repression doesn't give him more legitimacy. On the contrary, I think it keeps on isolating him, even of those that were his allies before. It is unsustainable. I think it is inconceivable that Maduro feels today that he can kill 1, 10, or 50 Venezuelans and nothing will happen to him. So he has to be held accountable. And there are mechanisms in the international community to do that and to send clear messages that crimes against humanity will have consequences. And believe me, these messages do reach the sectors that today are left supporting Maduro. So is this easy? No, this is absolutely very risky. You ask if there's a risk that El Mundo and I could be put in prison. Certainly. They are looking for us intensively. I mean, they have put in prison people that they thought knew where I am. And that's the reality we're facing right now. And every day we that passes by, more and more members of all political parties are either imprisoned or have to move out of the country. Many have left the country, and it is hard to maintain not only the will to fight, which is there, but the capacity to operate this new wave of actions, a new phase of actions and mobilization that we were putting in place. The last time we went to the streets, on the 28th of August, when a month after the election, well, you know what happened. Viaggio Piglieri, which is the chief of Convergencia, a member of the Plataforma Unitaria, well, he was persecuted for over half an hour by several cars, motorcycles, until finally he was in prison with his son. And believe me, we felt quite hurt that there wasn't anywhere safe where we could send him. So that's a reality we're facing right now, and I am very proud to see how members of all political parties in Venezuela have behaved courageously right now, and we've never been, more united and clear that we need to maintain pressure growing and we need to resist.
Thank you. The second question from Nash Kulandalur from the Prospect United Kingdom. We met 10 years ago in Venezuela. The different forces have remained loyal to Maduro. How important is their support, and how do you convince them to support you and the people of Venezuela?
David, no te escuché. You refer to the military?
Yes, we met with Nash says on the question. We met 10 years ago in Venezuela.
I know. But
the different forces have remained loyal to Maduro.
The different forces.
The armed forces.
The armed forces.
Well, the armed forces.
Okay.
How important is their support? Okay.
Okay, thank you. Of course, yes, thank you. Yeah, certainly is very important. Because that's today the only thing Maduro has left. I mean, not only the military, also the paramilitary. But I mean, the individuals that are armed and are willing to follow instructions to attack innocent individuals. And as I said before, I believe that we couldn't have been able to collect the tally sheets if we wouldn't have had the support of the base of the military. And within the institution, it is obvious that they know what happened, and there's great conflict. Nonetheless, I'm not prepared to tell you, or I don't think we have enough information regarding the degree of divisions that might are happening, that should be happening as we speak. But I know they are, because they know the truth. So one of the things we need to keep on doing is letting it clear for the armed forces that this system is not sustainable. That regardless of what Maduro tells them, and one of the things is that the world will look the other way around soon, because it will get tired insisting on pressing Venezuela, and that's part of our most important task, to have the world understand the degree of damage Maduro is doing, not also to Venezuela but the region, and the opportunity we have. I think it is obvious that in a world that has been so polarized, even in the United States right now, with a very particular election, you see Venezuela is a bipartisan issue, and the support we're getting from Congress and the two houses and the House and Senate and the two parties is an evidence that Venezuela is being seen as an issue of maximum priority and national security. And that is happening also as well in Europe. We're seeing that there are very few issues that get the 27 countries together with a unique position. That is happening in Latin America as well. So besides Cuba, Nicaragua, and Honduras and Bolivia, no one else has recognized Maduro. So I think it is a tough moment, because the regime has a criminal structure, nature, and rational, and that's how they act. But I am convinced that we are moving ahead every day that goes by, and we have to stay alive and free. That's one of our main challenges, certainly.
Perfect. We have the third question, Samantha Schmidt from the Washington Post. I would like to know, what steps do you think the U.S. government should be taking next in Venezuela? Do you think the Biden administration should maintain existing oil licenses in Venezuela? Should sanctions be tightened anyway? Yeah, that's it.
Well, Samantha, thank you so much, because you've been very close to all this process, and I highlighting individuals that are extremely courageous, and I think it's important to put face to the numbers, and beyond us, that the Venezuelan citizens that feel this is an existential struggle, much more than an electoral one, even a spiritual one. That's why this is so strong, and that's why this has no way back. I certainly think the United States should do much more, and I've been very clear to them and to other countries. I think that perpetrators of human rights violations and crimes against humanity should know that they will be held account, because it sends a message to the rest of them not to do that, not only in the military but also today in the judiciary system, including el fiscal general de la nación, which it's hard to refer to him as that, because he clearly is illegitimate, but also has committed himself numerous crimes, and he has turned into one of the main tools to persecute and silence society. So I think these messages should come clear to the regime and to these individuals. Regarding the oil sector, if there's someone that believes in opening markets and turning Venezuela into the energy hub of the Americas. It's us, it's me. I do think that these companies should understand that it is in their best interest, as well as Venezuelan creditors, for a transition to democracy as fast as possible, and not supporting the regime. I think that for the first time in 25 years, we have aligned the interest of every single stakeholder with a transition in Venezuela. And I'm even talking about the creditors and Venezuelan bondholders that, some of them have been one of the main supporters of the regime in the last years, and promoting lobbying and other actions to normalize the situation, and even sometimes to wash the face of Maduro in front of the rest of the world. Today, our belief is that most of them understand that there's no way Maduro will be able to restructure the debt, and that they will not be paid if the regime stays in power. So even their interests are aligned with a peaceful and organized and stable transition. So I think that the companies that are currently in Venezuela are thinking into coming to Venezuela, they also start to evaluate the cost in terms of reputation and goodwill that anyone close to Maduro will is paying right now, will pay in the days to come.
Next question is Maria Jose Noriega Ramirez from El Espectador de Colombia. I have this question for you. How to reach out to the circle that surrounds Nicolás Maduro, who currently supports him, and what could the opposition offer them to generate a break that could eventually lead to a transition?
Well, Maria Jose, there are some people on the circles of the system that have reached to us. There are some that understand that this is not sustainable. Of course, they are terrified. And there are other actors, international actors, that are using their connections to Maduro currently to try to show him that it is also in his best interest to sit down in a serious negotiation. I believe that Maduro's leverage to negotiate is not increasing, but on the contrary, is decreasing because of the abuses he has committed regarding human rights and the situation of the country, which is deteriorating every day. So I think we need to keep doing that. We use different channels, and I think that some initiatives such as the one being carried on by President Petro and Lula have that objective. How effective they have been? Well, probably not what we expected, but certainly the message is being carried on. And we have been clear that we are willing to give incentives and guarantees, but those specifics will be subject of the negotiation.
Tom Phillips from The Guardian. Given the arrest of several close allies, the arrest warrant issued last week against Edmundo González, and the recognition from Celso Amorín here in Brazil a few days ago that authoritarian escalation is underway, do you and Mr. González plan to stay in Venezuela, or do you believe you will be forced to seek exile abroad? Is it really possible to stay in Venezuela given the dangerous times you said the country was living through?
Tom, every day that goes by is harder. That's true, and riskier. That's true. And we face a ruthless regime that is able to do anything in terms of forcing people, blackmailing people, threatening people, families. I mean, they have no limits in their cruelty. That's true. Nonetheless, I believe my duty is to stay in Venezuela, close to our teens and our people that are either in prison or hiding, and doing as much as we can to take care of ourselves.
Ian Wells from the BBC, thank you for doing this. Could I please ask, the international community has largely not recognized the result, but has also not recognized Edmundo Gonzalez as president. Do you think it is time that they should, and what would you like countries like the US and the UK do next?
Well, thank you very much. I certainly think they should recognize Edmundo Gonzalez in what he is. I mean, everybody knows that Edmundo Gonzalez won by a landslide. I mean, no one questioned that. For some time, they insisted, and we understood, certain countries to demand the regime to produce intelligence. But it's obvious they're not going to do it. They use all this initiative to go to the Supreme Court to kind of give some legitimacy to the fact that they were not going to produce their results. For some time, we even feared that they were able to print false intelligence. Because, I mean, they took 3 weeks before they finally announced that they were not going to do it. And they had the paper, they had the machines. I mean, they could have done that and put us in a situation in which of the two were actually true and authentic. But I think they realized that there were so many evidence in terms of videos, of witnesses, and even military reading intelligence in the different voting centers that they weren't going to be able to produce that force without leaving evidence. And something is happening. Let me tell you that many witnesses of the PSUV, of the party of Maduro, are starting to speak out and saying, we have the results, we were there. And what the opposition is saying is true. So if everybody knows that Edmundo Gonzalez won by a landslide, and through Venezuelan constitution, by Venezuelan constitution, whoever gets the most votes is president-elect, it is time to move ahead. It is time to move ahead. And I think some countries perhaps have hold from doing that, giving some time for the initiatives of the three countries to approach Maduro. But I think we need to increase our stake at this point and speak clearly with the truth. And I think the UK, Europe, Canada should, move forward and follow what already some Latin American countries have already stated, that Edmundo Gonzalez is president-elect and that he should be juramentado as president of Venezuela on January 10th, 2025.
Thank you. Andreina Triago from Bloomberg. Do you believe individual sanctions that are coming against Venezuelan officials and others, as well as visa restrictions against official relatives, will increase pressure on Maduro to negotiate? Do you believe the U.S. should take any other action, such as rescinding specific licenses to oil companies?
If you don't have pressure on different aspects of the structure of the regime, then what are you going to negotiate? You need both things. So that's why I disagree when some people try to confront the approach of the administrations, the previous and the actual administration in the US. I think you need both things. You need to have full pressure and you need to have also incentives. And that's what we are asking for the international community to do, not only the United States. I mean, people that are committed crimes should be held accountable, because that gives a sign, it sends a clear sign to those that are pressed to do the same, not to do it, if they put in balance what's going on. and certainly with what the regime has done in the last days, I think it's past due the action of the international community in this sense. So, and we will still keep insisting that we're willing to sit down in a true negotiation, but you need to put pressure for them to understand that the cost of repression and the cost of staying in power will increase every day that goes by.
Eric Basail Emil from Politico. Could you speak to what the opposition plan? Could you speak to what the opposition plan or strategy is to break the stalemate that seems to be developing at this point? And what do you make of the fact that Washington is seemingly deferring to Brazil and Colombia negotiations and dialogue approach and not articulating its own vision for how to break through the stalemate?
Well, I don't think we are in a stalemate. I think there are things moving, and some are not obvious, but they are. And I think the international community is increasing slowly their pressure, and I do think it has to be done more significantly. And we've been in touch with presidents of countries and prime ministers in Venezuela and Europe, as well as ministers of state. And I think there is a growing agreement that should be the path. And I do think the United States should do that as well, with getting a lot of support from Congress since they came back, and initiatives from Congress, bipartisan initiatives, are moving in the same direction.
Siguiente pregunta, next question is Guillermo José Torres de Guapa Televisión en Puerto Rico. I'm going to translate. How do you evaluate the behavior of Nicolás Maduro in recent days after the U.S. government ceased his plane in Dominican Republic, and the pressure that the U.S. could be doing against Maduro's regime?
You know, I think many of the reactions Maduro and his allies are taking these days, I think, are delivered, or the target is what's left of their groups, their party, and sectors in the armed forces. I think they're speaking mostly to them because they know what's going on within these groups and institutions. I don't know if you realize the magnitude. How do you say descalabro in English? Someone help me, Patricia. Someone help me. I don't know. Well, the crackdown, yeah, of the Chavista structure and movement. I mean, if you look at what happened on July 28th, he lost in every single state and over 90% of the counties. In places that the regime used to win with 80%, 90% of the votes, they lost. So this is huge in poor areas, in rich areas, in rural areas, in urban areas. I mean, all around the country, they lost total possibility of social control, and their own mobilization failed. They are aware of that. So yes, these reactions try to convey the idea that they are uncontrolled, and that's Venezuela's been normalizing. That is not true. What's actually happening, yes, they have put a terror in all sectors, but society is regrouping, and we will maintain our pressure and new ways of mobilization under these circumstances that keep our people as safe as possible. And in this sense, we have to be resilient. We need to be very intelligent. We need to be audacious, and at the same time prudent to protect our people. But we will not stop, and we will not give up. And they know that. They know that. That's why this moment is so dangerous, but at the same time decisive. And our main task right now, I think it's my main responsibility, is to maintain the will to fight, alive and growing. Because believe me, beyond fear, the worst effect or the tool that produces the most damage on our movement is its demoralization. And they use that. And they use people that are supposedly in the opposition to produce that, to get the idea that we are in a stalemate or that Maduro is consolidating. And that's absolutely false.
Regina Garcia Cano, the Associated Press. Beyond criticism, expressions of concern, calls for the release of the actas or tally sheets, and even calls for investigation from the ICC. What practical steps do you believe the international community must take for Maduro's government to recognize the results you made public after the election? What is your interpretation of Maduro's cabinet reshuffling?
Well, I would say, Regina, all of the above, and there are many others that have been put in place previously. I've been thinking of what took place around the world with the transition to democracy in South Africa, and what the world was willing to do at that moment, and they turned Venezuela into they turned South Africa into a world cause, and that's what we're doing right now. We want to engage not only with governments but with the people. We want to have the people, Democrats all around the world, Europeans, Asians, African, of course, Latin Americans and Americans, North Americans, to understand how, important this moment is, even for them. Of course, for, ethical reasons and solidarity with human rights and freedom. But beyond that, what would mean for the world if Maduro would consolidate by force? What would mean for the region? I mean, we could have in a couple of years or even less, 4, 5, 6 million of Venezuelans fleeing. What it means to have El Tren de Aragua and other transnational crime organizations having, the support of Maduro regime. Maduro's alliance with Iran and Russia and Syria, what it means having that, ¿cómo se dice? Beach, ay Dios, ahí voy a necesitar ayuda a ustedes.
¿Qué quiero decir?
Iván, Syria. The window, sí, la punta de playa, o sea, como el punto de entrada and operations in the region. And I do think that, the idea that it wasn't possible to have a transition, that it wasn't possible to defeat Maduro, had been created throughout the world, and certain sectors, financial sectors, as I mentioned before, energy sectors, as we've said before, because there were some actors that had interest in the very short term. And I think that was very short-sighted, because I think it's been proved that the nature of this regime doesn't give an opportunity to Venezuela to develop in any sector, even in the energy. On the contrary, if we have a transition to democracy, Venezuela can turn in the strongest ally of the U.S. and Western democracies in terms of our energy opportunities, not only in oil and gas. So, as I said before, I mean, this is a critical moment. Georgina, the world needs to act. They have a toolbox, and that has to be coordinated with intelligence, creativity, and strength. And that's what we're demanding right now. I mean, we the Venezuelan people have done everything. Everything. We built the strongest social movement against a tyranny. We competed with the rules of the tyranny, absolutely unjust and asymmetrical. And we won, and we proved it. So if the world or some government is thinking to look the other way around, imagine where sovereign will and popular sovereignty and vote as an institution ends up in the Western world. Then it would mean that elections are worthless, and that is something that we cannot let happen. And we need you at this point, because your colleagues in Venezuela, you are aware, have been practically silenced. So people even fear to retweet one of my messages nowadays. So we need to overcome this. And while we, bring these forces back and act in this new phase and reality, we need the world to understand and to press in the direction we are moving.
Haley Hunt from the MSNBC. What is your message to President Biden? And can votes and democratic ideals ever win over authoritarianism? Tell me about it.
Yes, Kelly.
We are on that. Sorry about the comment, but
yes, absolutely yes. It's not easy. It's very dangerous. I've lost good friends. Just last week, the person that was free, that I most trusted, was kidnapped. And Berkes Rocha, and next day Diario Bilieri, which was one of my closest allies. So we do not underestimate what's going on and what they're willing to do. But the answer is yes. And I think the Biden administration, as well as both parties in Congress, have the biggest opportunity to prove that can be part and exercise their leadership of the free world. If a conflict so urgent and profound and that represents such a risk to a threat to the security of a hemisphere cannot be addressed and solved, then it seems very unlikely that other conflicts further away can be solved. And that's the message I want to convey. I mean, this is urgent. I mean, this, I know migration is one of the issues that most concern the American society nowadays. And you cannot address the consequences. You have to address the causes. And the causes of Venezuelan migration is Maduro himself and the regime. And the fact that you saw migration declining in the last months significantly is because most Venezuelans have hope and still have hope and still believe, as I do, that the end of this process will be freedom. How many days will it take? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But I am absolutely convinced that every day that Maduro prolongs the agony, the damage is huge, not also for Venezuela, but for the region. And as I said before, never before we had aligned all the interests, all the vectors of stakeholders in one same direction, which is an orderly and sustainable transition to democracy. And that's where we're moving. We wish it could have been faster, certainly. But this has made evident that we are not facing a conventional dictatorship. It is a criminal system. And that's how it must be addressed. And as I said, there are many things that could be done in addition to those that are being put in place right now from the international community perspective.
We have reached the hour already. I think we can say a few more minutes, I've been told, but probably not all the questions could be answered because it's already 11 a.m. So I'll go with the next question. Stefano Posebon from CNN International. On November 5th, the U.S. will have a new president. While President Trump embraced a maximum pressure strategy during the Guaido days, the Biden-Harris administration gambled on deeper engagement with Maduro, which led to the July 28th election. How do you think either of the two candidates could help the Venezuelan cause once a new administration is in place? And can you confirm whether you spoke with either of the candidate teams?
Stefano, I think I mentioned it before. I think it's a mistake to see it as different approaches. I think it's a mix of them that has brought where we are right now. I mean, if you don't have pressure and threats, there's nothing to negotiate. There's no way you will have someone sitting down to negotiate. So you have to have both approaches. And yes, we've been in contact with both teams.
Alonso Moleiro from El País. How do you feel now? Optimistic, afraid, worried?
Both, Alonso. I'm certainly worried for you and from every Venezuelan that is facing this horrible situation. I'm worried because I see how social issues and the life of the poor in Venezuela is already deteriorating and will be damaged significantly in the days to come. I've been in contact with sectors in the food business, and they are terrified with what they are, they're seeing happening in terms of consumption. But at the same time, I'm more than optimistic. I'm absolutely convinced that what we did is huge. I mean, this is historic. Most people thought it was impossible, and you know that. They told you, they told me, it was impossible to get here, and here we are. And we have to feel very proud of what we did, and we have to recognize the strength we have, and we have to fight against the instruments that the regime use, which is lies, terror, and demoralization. And when you find so-called, experts, analysts, and so on that start saying that, this is not moving ahead or that Maduro is consolidating or stabilizing, that is false. That is false. And whoever knows Venezuelan will know that that is not happening. On the contrary. But I'm not saying this is going to be easy. No, I've never said it. And certainly these are the most dangerous times we're facing.
Ana Rodríguez del Tiempo de Colombia. Maduro continues to ignore the calls from Colombia and Brazil. Nothing more was learned from yesterday's meeting with Petro and Lula. What do you think should be the next steps of these two countries? Sorry to just make a comment here, Corina. I've been told that while we have been on this press conference, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Colombia talked to Canciller Murillo, habló a la prensa, and he said that the meeting yesterday with Maduro did not happen, and they are now trying to reschedule. So, what do you think should be the next steps of Brazil and Colombia?
Well, they have to get Maduro to answer the phone, at the least.
Indeed. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera. Even if Maduro is isolated, he has learned to bypass international pressure and economic sanctions. What would he recognize that he lost the election?
Lucia, I know. Some people perhaps think that we've tried everything in Venezuela, but you more than anyone know that every situation is different, you know, and we are not the same country that we were a year ago. I would say 2 months ago, and yes, we can learn a lot from history, but there are different forces evolving in the world nowadays, and you know, I think what we lacked in the past was the right coordination among all these strategies. Today we have a legitimate leadership in the opposition, legitimate, because of the primaries and because of the election. We have a united nation that goes beyond the immediate political parties. This is very important. Never in 25 years we had Venezuelans so close and determined to move ahead. And never before we have the world calling the regime for what it is. Not a conventional, you know, authoritarian or, you know, como que decían,
competitive, o competitive, también le decían competitive authoritarianism.
Yeah, or
competitive.
Imperfect democracy and todo tipo de eufemismos, you know? We know what we're facing right now. And we have a strategy to do it. And we've come a really long way. We've never been stronger than we are today. The regime has never been weaker than it is today. So this is not a time to feel frustrated. On the contrary, we have to be pragmatic. We have to put our feet in the ground and understand what are the options, that you say, how we coordinate and how we take care of us and of our leadership. But we need to speak out and do not fall in the traps of the regime, which is that he's saying, well, you have tried everything and here we are. No. It's not the same situation. It's not the same Venezuela, and it's not the same relation and willingness to act of the international community.
Okay, we have three questions left and we can close at 11:15.
David, pero I really need to run. Why don't
okay.
you read the three of them and then I can make.
Sorry, I didn't. What do you?
Puedes leerla las tres. Read the three of them.
Okay, sí. From the Telegraph, what amnesty measures and for which figures from the regime would the opposition be willing to consider in order to facilitate a democratic transition? That's one. The other one from the BBC, are you in touch with the CNE member Juan Carlos Del Pino? And the last one from the Italian daily La Repubblica, could the Holy See help in finding a solution, and how? That's it.
Okay. Regarding measures and incentives, it would all depend on the relative strength in which you reach a negotiation table. What will you need to offer? I do not think it is proper to enter into specific incentives or measures, but I do think that Maduro's negotiation position deteriorates every day that passes because of his obvious and cruel violations of human rights. We are certainly willing to give incentives for this process to move ahead peacefully and orderly. Secondly, yes, I've been in touch with Juan Carlos Del Pino. And third, I do believe the Vatican and the Church, the Catholic Church, has an important role to play because it's a very much respected institution in Venezuela. And I do think they're doing some things and can do more. So I guess I'm praying for that to happen.
Well, thank you, Maria Corina, for your time because we know that you are extremely busy, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And the only thing I can say, many of you have been.
Muy bien, ya hemos escuchado precisamente esta entrevista de María Corina, esta rueda de prensa a medios internacionales el día de hoy. Muy bien, pero precisamente, ¿qué es lo que ha mencionado María Corina? María Corina ha tenido duras palabras en contra precisamente en contra del gobierno, de la dictadura, del régimen de Nicolás Maduro, ¿no? Entonces ha hablado el día de hoy en esta rueda de prensa la líder opositora María Corina, quien ha prometido mantener la presión sobre Nicolás Maduro para que deje el cargo en enero, pero también ha pedido a la comunidad internacional, ha pedido a la comunidad internacional precisamente que los apoyen, ¿no? Ha pedido precisamente María Corina el apoyo precisamente a la comunidad internacional. Pero María Corina también el día de hoy ha mencionado que María Corina ha mencionado precisamente en esta rueda de prensa, habló sobre todo lo que pasó en Venezuela, de este fraude electoral hecho precisamente por el régimen de Nicolás Maduro, ¿no? El día de hoy se ha pronunciado así María Corina en esta rueda de prensa internacional. Ha mencionado también que seguirá luchando por defender precisamente el voto, de los venezolanos, y además también ha mencionado que continuará precisamente con esta informando a todo el mundo que para que se enteren precisamente del régimen de Maduro y qué es lo que está haciendo en contra del pueblo venezolano, ¿no? Entonces María Corina también ha mencionado precisamente, a ver un momento, también María Corina ha mencionado en esta rueda de prensa que necesita apoyo internacional urgente, es lo que también ha mencionado, y que va a hacer todo lo posible para que Maduro deje el cargo en enero. Ha pedido a la comunidad internacional estar a la altura de las circunstancias y reconocer de inmediato al candidato presidencial Edmundo González Urrutia. Ha dicho esto en esta rueda de prensa. Además también precisamente hablando con los periodistas desde un lugar no revelado. Recordemos que María Corina también se encuentra resguardada porque también es parte de esta persecución por parte del régimen de Nicolás Maduro. Ha reafirmado su compromiso de negociar incentivos y garantías para que puedan conducir una transición pacífica del poder. Nosotros, el pueblo venezolano, lo hemos hecho todo, afirmó. Competimos con las reglas de la tiranía y ganamos, y lo demostramos. Entonces, si el mundo en algún gobierno está pensando en mirar para otro lado, imagínese dónde termina la voluntad soberana y la soberanía popular en el mundo occidental. Significaría que las elecciones no valen nada. Estos comentarios se han producido precisamente tras esta orden de aprehensión en contra de Edmundo González, ¿no? En contra de Edmundo González, quien fue el candidato opositor en las elecciones y quien según la oposición ha resultado el ganador de estas elecciones. Aunque el Consejo Electoral, que está lleno de simpatizantes del partido PSUV, ha declarado a Maduro como ganador, nunca publicó los resultados de las votaciones que respaldaban estas afirmaciones. Sin embargo, la coalición opositora afirmó que González derrotó a Maduro por un margen de 2-1 y presentó como prueba los resultados de más del 80% de las máquinas de votación electrónica utilizadas en las elecciones. Miles de personas han salido precisamente a marchar porque no están de acuerdo con este pronunciamiento del CNE, ¿no? Entonces salieron a marchar a todas horas después del anuncio. Las protestas fueron mayormente pacíficas, pero los manifestantes mencionan que también los manifestantes fueron capturados por el gobierno de Nicolás Maduro, ¿no? También recordemos que María Corina ha mencionado que precisamente ellos están luchando desde Venezuela y espera que el mundo también apoye esta causa para una Venezuela libre. Habló también de los abusos que está cometiendo el régimen de Nicolás Maduro en contra de los derechos humanos. Además, también ha mencionado algo muy importante, que precisamente aquellos que participaron en el PSUV el día de las elecciones ya están empezando a hablar del resultado precisamente de Edmundo González, quien mencionan que ha sido el que ganó las elecciones. Además, también ha dicho que hay terror por todas partes, que todos los venezolanos sienten ya terror al salir a la calle porque cada vez el régimen de Nicolás Maduro está más brutal. Muy bien, entonces esto ha sido el pronunciamiento precisamente de María Corina Machado, pero tenemos una información de último minuto. María Corina Machado responde a Tarek William Saab, que recordemos tuvo el día de hoy una rueda de prensa. Así es que vámonos ya al siguiente en vivo. Ha respondido entonces María Corina a Tarek William Saab. Vamos a saber qué es lo que ha dicho María Corina en este pronunciamiento en contra de Tarek William Saab, quien recordemos es el que emitió la orden de aprehensión en contra de Edmundo González Urrutia. Entonces vamos a ver ya en el siguiente en vivo qué es lo que ha dicho María Corina, cuál es el pronunciamiento que tiene. Muy bien, hemos escuchado entonces ya a María Corina Machado, pero por favor déjeme saber en la cajita de comentarios sus opiniones acerca de lo mencionado por María Corina. Muy bien, muchas gracias a todos los que se conectaron. Recuerden que somos el Búnker Digital, tu lugar seguro de información. Se despide su amiga Elena Zapata. Vámonos al siguiente en vivo.